Monday AI agents took over my work. And I absolutely love it. Chasing deadlines, writing status reports, updating stakeholders. Agents handle the daily grind now. They live inside Monday.com, so they see the full picture. My work, my team, the whole company. And I don't have to worry about the data. It's safe, which means I'm free to focus on the big stuff, knowing everything runs smoothly in the background. It's completely shifted the way we work. Create your own AI agent in minutes on Monday.com.
This is a special episode of History as It Happens at the Movies.
Much of that territory is unexplored. It's wild, unpredictable, and dangerous.
What are you called? George Washington. Whose fort is that?
So I went to Mount Vernon in Northern Virginia for a screening of Young Washington, a film by director Jon Erwin, starring Ben Kingsley, Mary Louise Parker, Andy Serkis, Kelsey Grammer, and in the title role, William Franklyn-Miller as young George Washington. The film is set in pre-revolutionary America on the frontier as war erupts between the British and French empires in North America. It is very much a war film. The performances were excellent, starting with Miller, who I had a few minutes with after watching the movie. So you grew up in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. You did not grow up as I did in the United States. Mm-hmm. We're, bred with George Washington. He's a legend. Maybe that was good approach to the part without all that mythology.
It's a good point you make. I don't actually know the answer, but I think for me there was probably less pressure, if that makes any sense. I think young George is also relatively unknown when it comes to, obviously his older years. And so for me, maybe there was a sense of less pressure, which helped me really trying to find out what his character was and really the birth of his ambition, I suppose.
So this was your first major movie role?
It definitely was. I've done small bits here and there, but this is the biggest one yet.
So you picked an obscure character to play right off the bat then?
Yes, we're doing really difficult stuff or nothing by the looks of things. But no,
how did you prepare for the role? Did you read a lot of American history? Or?
Definitely. I mean, there's so much on his older years, so there's a lot of accounts that he wrote. There's 100 Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior, which came into play. And so a lot of podcasts really as well online. And also John and the whole team over there sent me so much information to go through. To list them now would take a while, but I have them on my emails because I've gone through. We had about 3 weeks to really study the character before we started shooting, which for me I found was enough. Really for me it was the mentality, and the 100 Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior will really help me in that aspect.
And the accent?
Yeah, difficult one. So we worked on that 3 weeks before, and then religiously pretty much every day on set. So it's a mix of English, American, and Irish. It's a hybrid. John Adams was a TV series that we studied and focused on the accent.
And you were talking here after the film on the panel discussion about the pressure you felt. I can't relate to that. I'm not a movie actor or anything like that, but you are playing the most important American ever. And Americans now are very politically polarized, but even that aside, they would come to a movie like this with certain expectations of what should he look like, how should he comport himself.
I mean, it was a huge responsibility, and it was quite nerve-wracking. I think for me, again, it was really just trying to, this is the man, in all honesty, this is a young man at the very start of the film. He's figuring out where he wants to go. He's navigating through his life. He's dealing with failure, with loss, with love, and all these things that really everyone goes through. And so I think for me, it was really, learning about his older years and admiring that, but then also going back to the birth of it and trying to figure out, but also sort of forget about, his later years as well. This was, before the legend. So this is really how a young man, I guess, navigated his life.
What I really liked about the beginning of the movie is something that the American Revolution overturned. That is ascribed status, right? Mm-hmm. You are in this station, tough. If you don't like it, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
As you depicted George Washington, he was pushing back against that from the very beginning.
Yeah, and it's tough. And I think that's, can be adapted to today's world, I guess, in a sense. But yeah, it was him battling with the society, I guess, of the time. But he didn't give up. And I think that's something that people can take away from this film and hopefully look up to and believe in.
So I'm interested now in reading any reviews, any criticism of how Washington's early exploits and failures were depicted in this movie, as well as his relationship with native peoples who found themselves trying to survive a war in their lands fought between two colonial empires. I thought the movie did a good job of portraying that tension. Now, it was during the Revolutionary War, a generation later, when General Washington ordered a scorched earth campaign against the Iroquois. In this film, young Washington needs the Indians as allies. He is ambitious but inexperienced and was lucky to survive the campaign at all. Here's Doug Bradburn, the president and CEO of George Washington's Mount Vernon. All right, so when I saw this movie was coming out, my first instinct is, oh boy, a George Washington movie, they make him into a god or a hero. But when I saw that Mount Vernon was going to screen it, and then I was invited to come here to watch it, I'm like, okay, this must have some real value. What is the value of this film?
Well, it's a great film. It's a war film. It's about George Washington as a young man in the French and Indian War, really learning to become a leader. He's a very ambitious man, but he doesn't quite fit in. He doesn't have the right education. He doesn't have the right polish. He doesn't have the right connections. And that affects him in a lot of aspects of his life. And then ultimately, he has some success. He gets some luck. He gets some opportunity. He has some failure. And then he learns from that failure and gets another opportunity and turns into the man that really understands that he's going to be somebody that serves for his men. Now, that's the sort of story of the fictional tale they tell in Young Washington. And I think it ultimately is actually quite true to the story of the young George Washington's experience.
I just read a biography of George Washington, so a lot of this was fresh in my head. I was actually impressed with how accurate the chronology was. All movies, all historical movies have to take some liberties, as long as they get the main frame correct. And I think this movie did accomplish that. And really, that's the point, right? To try to spur some interest in this, because as the director mentioned, there aren't that many good movies about George Washington.
It's a movie about George Washington. It's a story about the origin of our country as well that's really not well understood. And it is a piece of art. So it's a work of art that's trying to tell a story, tell us something, in this case, because it's based on a true story, it has verisimilitude to it, has some truth to it, but it is a piece of art. But no different than, say, like a painting by Trumbull of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is fictional because it never happened that way, but yet is iconic in the way we think about the story of who we are as a nation. It hangs in the Capitol. It's a history painting. And this is like that. It's a portrait of a time that helps us understand some essentials in a medium that's very common for our eye, for our literacy level, and very powerful because of the emotions and the characters as they're developed.
Emotive films, right? They're supposed to take us somewhere. They're not history books. You're a scholar. You can appreciate a movie like this. I'm not a scholar. I appreciated the film. What I liked is that it showed Washington as a human being. He had love interests. He cried. He laughed. He's not the austere, person on the $1 bill in this movie.
Yeah. He's a hard guy for Americans to get to know.
Partly he's everywhere.
Yeah, he's ubiquitous, and that is part of what makes him hard to get to know. He's on your dollar bill. He's named the Capitol. I mean, his monument is this giant obelisk, completely out of scale. And so he's ubiquitous but unknowable for many, many people. Here at Mount Vernon, we, of course, argue that this is a place where you can get inside his mind's eye a little bit. It's a place he was passionate about. But that, gets into psychology and all these things because he doesn't leave us long autobiographies like Ben Franklin explaining, how he wants people to think about himself. So he always in his own time wanted to be known by his deeds, not by his words. So this is a great portrait of him as a young man who isn't anybody. He's nobody. He has no reputation. He has to make a reputation. He has to start building that character that will give him a place in the world. And so I think it's a really fun place to start with the history of the American Revolutionary era. There's so few films about the founding of the country. It's strange in this country why we don't have a lot of films about the founding. You look at like French cinema, every great French artiste has got to make a Napoleon film or a French Revolution film, but that in America has very few of these things.
Yes. The sequel presumably will be Old Washington. Any truth to the rumor that you're going to audition for the part?
I would love to be in a movie. I'd love to be a star. I'd be a terrible Washington, however. But
now, I auditioned for this role, but they said you're only 5'4", Martin. Sorry, we can't do anything with CGI.
I love the actor they did find for this. A new light in the constellation of stars out there.
So about the movie, Young Washington is a collaboration between the Wonder Project, which produces and curates movies and series, and Angel, the film's distributor. Bob Gerard is one of the movie's executive producers. What are the challenges in producing a film like this? Setting aside for a moment our very hyper-polarized political climate, just trying to bring George Washington to life, who is a legendary figure, making him a mortal man, right?
Right. First, this film is Jon Erwin's film. And from our perspective, we wanted to make sure that people understood being young Washington. It was the transition in his life as a young man from wanting to be part of the British Army and military and wanting to be formally educated and being told no on both counts, having his favorite brother die, having his mother die, but yet having incredible ambition. But at the same token, so much so that he didn't have the experience that matched his ambition. Through his debacle at Fort Necessity and things, he did one thing, he did several things amazingly great, but one thing was he never repeated the same mistake. And he always learned from his experience, and he always was moving forward with a very positive viewpoint about people in general.
You know, I was talking with somebody the other day about how there's so few good movies about George Washington, and he is indisputably the most important American ever. Without him, our republic would not have been as a general and then as first president of the United States. Why do you think, you're in the movie business, so you would know better than I, why have there been no good movies about George Washington?
That's a good question. They have had a few documentaries and miniseries and things, but I can't speak for the studios at large or the major streamers and things. I just think that at the time they felt that the interest wasn't there for them to financially invest. They looked at everything from a business advantage, point of view, and I think they just felt like, been there, done that. This is an old subject matter. Younger audiences don't like to go to historical movies, all the usual reasons why they would pass on a script like this or an idea to do it. And it takes somebody with a lot of guts and ideas and talent like Jon Erwin to put everything together to make it. And we found the right kind of combination of investors to come along to help Jon make it.
When you're preparing to do a movie like this, do you take into account politics? This is what I mean by that. For instance, in my own work, I'm not here to cater to people's feelings. No. I'm here to give them the truth as I see it. And people are going to come to a movie with their own prejudices. They have an expectation of how George Washington should be depicted. And this goes across the political spectrum, left, right, and center. How do you approach that issue?
That's a good question for Jon, actually. But I don't think that we didn't take it with a political lens of any kind whatsoever. And I think if you see the film, you will understand that it's the transition of a great man becoming probably still the greatest president this country's ever had.
Because he can't foresee today's political nonsense.
Of course not.
Right?
No.
And all these silly arguments we have about...
I think he would be disappointed if he saw how divisive things are in this country. And hopefully this film is a unifier, and I see it as a unifying film. You'll see that it's not real political, and it just tells a remarkable story about a extremely remarkable man, George Washington. It doesn't get more complex than that. Young Washington is meant to get Americans interested in their history again, and it will be used as a learning tool, too. David Bobb is the president and CEO of the Bill of Rights Institute, which is providing the educational materials for the film, including a family discussion guide. You can find that at billofrightsinstitute.org, and a curriculum for teachers and students in the fall, all done in conjunction with Mount Vernon. And among the subjects I wanted to talk to him about was why there are so few good movies about George Washington or other important Americans. So tell me about your feelings about this film and why it's important right now.
This is the Washington nobody knows. I think you're right that it's a miss by Hollywood to have not done more. I think of even the whole sweep of American freedom fighters, right? Where's the movie about Frederick Douglass? There is a very fine Harriet Tubman movie, right? So there's a few out there. But the reason that I signed on to help with the educational products around this movie is the film's director, Jon Erwin of the Wonder Project, said, we want to spark curiosity in kids. It's not a documentary. It's the Washington that nobody knows because we've made him into a marble man, right? After all, he's represented by a 555-foot obelisk in the heart of the District of Columbia. This is not relatable. We do civics and history at the Bill of Rights Institute, and what we want to do is make the educational materials accessible, tell the real story, tell whole history. So this confronts the early challenges. It's a story, ultimately, of failure. Washington says in the movie, failure is a great teacher. I think that can be a powerful lesson for young people who are trying to figure out in this 21st century how to make their own way, right? They want to be famous. Washington wanted to be famous. He was ambitious for a lot of things and didn't always land that ambition. He had to realize, I got to be ambitious for the right things. That's why this movie matters.
It's hard to depict George Washington on film because he's a legend, yet he was a mortal man, right? Peeling away the layers of myth. And also in our hyper-polarized environment, people are going to come to this film with their own, he has to be depicted this way, he has to be depicted that way. How do you negotiate that?
I think the Wonder Project did an amazing job, and all credit to Jon Erwin and his team. They show Washington in a vulnerable place, right? As a kid, imagine you lose your father, the sadness that comes in. Also, you recognize that, hey, you're not going to be able to have the life maybe that you were thinking you were going to have. You weren't going to be able to go to the kind of elite school. You weren't going to have a path that was going to be very easy at all. Washington had to earn his character. He had to channel his ambition. This movie does a really good job of showing the Washington in his full colors. That is rare. The pedestal Washington is the guy that never failed, the guy that always succeeded and that was destined for success. That is not this movie's portrayal, and that's one of the reasons that I'm excited about it.
There's a lot of minor details too that maybe historians will pick at, but it's impossible. No one has a time machine to go back to the 18th century. How did Washington speak? The tone of his voice or the quality of his voice or his accent.
I'm a political scientist by training, love history, and I'm at an organization now where we teach history and civics. But nitpicking is not the point. This is not a documentary. This is a vivid Technicolor, thoroughly 21st century movie about a guy who we have a lot of kind of myths in our head about. Let's portray him as we think he was.
He's a person who laughed, cried,
tried to sneak into a party,
snored,
was rebellious, didn't always make the right decisions, was kind of grasping, had a love interest and didn't always know how to express himself around the ladies. All these things are shown, and I think what it does is it humanizes. We tend to show the founders in these poses that are not human.
Washington's austere smile, that face on our dollar bill, right? Historians believe that their job is not to offer a unifying vision of history. Yet at the same time, our semi-quincentennial is coming up, right? There's got to be something that we all can agree on here, and that is whether you think the American Revolution was a great event, a good event, somewhere on that spectrum. It's an important event, and it wouldn't have happened. I just recently read a large biography of George Washington. It really would not have happened without his leadership. He did have an innate quality.
He was indispensable, and I agree with you about that kind of historian's tendency. This is a more recent thing, right? To almost, you said not put them on a pedestal, but what about knocking them off? There's an in-between, and that I think is what this movie strikes the right tone, which is, can we appreciate as Americans, whether we're an academic or not, some measure of gratitude for the striving. The founding men and women set a standard and said, we want to live up to that standard. It's in our Declaration. We do not still today live up to that perfectly. But the fact that we erected a standard, that they did that, has made possible the striving of the abolitionists, of the suffragists, of those who fought in the civil rights movement, right? This has not been an easy struggle. It's not been a straight line. But I think in this 250th, we can have gratitude for them, those who have fought for these ideals, and let's look to the next 250.
So if you get around to seeing this movie, I hope you find it at the very least entertaining, whatever your politics. But I really hope it compels you to pick up a book about the American Revolution or George Washington or some related subject to learn about our nation's history in all its complexities. This has been a special episode of History as It Happens.